Hi, my name is Paula Glory, and this show is Farther Down the Rabbit Hole. The show is about going deeper into our consciousness in order to create new realities, and realities that are realities that we're more pleased with, and understanding how to master this dimension. This week I'm going to be having an entire week devoted to the Shroud of Turin. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday will be roll-ins of different documentaries that I've done with the Shroud of Turin from the New York Public Library. And then also JJ Hurtak, who is a scholar. He's a double PhD in the hard sciences and the soft sciences, and social scientist, he calls himself. And he heads up the Academy for Future Sciences. JJ Hurtak had some extraordinary experiences when he was, I think he was in college. He was a teacher, just a new professor, and very much had an orientation of a scientist, and all of a sudden had this explosion of new awareness and extraordinary experiences. So I want to tell my audience that there'll be many repetitions of these two different documentaries, and repetitions even of the conversation that I had with JJ Hurtak about it. So do not feel that you're looking at the same show twice. It's just that I'm trying to show the same thing from a different angle, sort of embedded with different perspectives or different parts of the conversation that I had with Dr. Hurtak. Today I'm really delighted to have with me Adele Linsalata. And Adele Linsalata is a psychic and a medium, and she is an expert and a master in the area of precipitated art, which is art that is not done by human hands. So welcome.
Welcome. Thank you, Paula.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Adele, I think what I'm so happy about having you here is that scientists have looked at the shroud from the point of view of carbon dating, from the point of view of a machine that we're going to take a look at with the roll-in, that shows that the photograph of the shroud has information in it that even we don't. If we took a photo of you or me, it wouldn't be there. But so we're looking at two major ways of looking at it scientifically. But now, with you and your expertise as precipitated art, we can look at it from that other perspective. But before we go into it, let's take a look at the roll-in.
Okay, sounds good.
So we ready for the roll-in? And this will be scientists at the Colorado Institute, and they're going to be
It's difficult enough to believe that a medieval forgery could stand up so well to the kind of investigation we've seen already. But there is yet another characteristic of the image that only the most recent technology has been capable of detecting. Here, at the U.S. Air Force Academy, Colorado Springs, a professor of physics and a professor of engineering have coordinated an intensive research program into the nature of the image on the shroud. Dr. Eric Jumper and Dr. John Jackson.
As a scientist, when I became interested in the computer pictures sent back from the Mariner spacecraft near Mars, I thought that perhaps some of this technology could be applied to the shroud. So then when I was in Albuquerque, I started a rather modest attempt at this, and at that time I met Eric Jumper.
Well, the meeting that John refers to was about 3.5 years ago, and since that time we've made many interesting discoveries about the shroud. Right now we'd like to show you what we feel is one of the most interesting, and it involves the use of this machine. And we'd like to tell you exactly how it works. We already have two filters of different density lined up under the television camera that you see here. The television signal is then fed into our equipment, and you can see the filters displayed on our TV monitor.
And of course, what you see are two squares of different shades of darkness. The television signal is processed by a VP8 image analyzer, which has the ability to translate the image patterns as adjustable levels of vertical relief on this monitor. Now watch what happens as I raise the relief. As you can see, the image intensity patterns are plotted as vertical relief in proportion to the amount of darkness that you see over here. I can also rotate the image and view it from various angles.
Now, before we put a picture of the shroud under the camera, let me show you something. I have here an ordinary photograph of myself in mess dress, one which I'm sure my mother would be very proud of. And I'm going to put this under the camera. Now, John is adjusting the gain in exactly the same way as he did with the squares. I'm sure you'll agree that even my mother would have trouble recognizing me there. Now, the reason for this is very simple. A normal photograph records only variations in light and does not record information about the distance the camera was from the subject. Now we'll put a picture of the shroud under the camera.
As you can see, unlike the photograph of Eric, this image is clearly recognizable. This can only be explained if the intensity levels of the shroud image itself are encoded with distance information from the cloth to the body. There are two interesting features which are revealed by this three-dimensional display. Firstly, there appears to be some kind of object which prevented an image from being formed. Note the depression around the face and the way the hair seems to drape over it. Even the beard appears to be divided by it. Perhaps this is a chin bandage.
And St. John also speaks of a napkin or sweat cloth or handkerchief that was over his head, or earlier described as round the face of Lazarus. And I think this is clearly functional. It was, as I understand it, a piece of cloth rather like this, which was then simply folded rather like a triangular bandage and made into a chin band, which would have been functionally necessary before rigor mortis set in to bind up the jaw in this sort of manner and tie over the top of the crown.
What we're now looking at is an image of the full body. We have an image of the front and one of the back. Of course, these are the burn marks, but what we're really interested in is the image between them. We see the head, the pectorals of the chest, the two arms, and the legs, with one knee slightly raised. What's interesting is that the knee is not raised well above the chest or the head, but looks like it's in the correct dimensions. We see that the back also has the same characteristics, and we can even see a bit of roundedness in the calf.
When I first saw this image, I think I knew how Secunda Pia must have felt when, in 1898, he saw his photographic image. As scientists, we believed that it would be practically impossible for a forger, much less a medieval one, to have produced an image like this.
I'm going to be showing my viewers that quite a bit more, but as a psychic and a medium, what kind of energy did you feel with that?
Well, that was really interesting, because when he was talking about when you see it raise up, it's almost like the precipitation of the DNA, actually, and it also could be with their energy, right? Because spirit always has energy. We have energy that's actually coming up and going through the cloth to sit there and make that impression. Isn't that interesting?
Right.
Yeah, I would love to sit there and touch that.
It's like the photograph, even a photograph of the image has information in it that this machine reads according to distance information, like that your nose is closer to me than your ears.
Right.
And so the shroud picture is faithful to how it looks, whereas a regular photograph, it doesn't have that distance information in it. So it was just one of the ways to show that this is an extraordinary document.
Yes, because can you imagine the type of energy that would be needed to sit there and do that? Because you and I would sit there and take a picture, and yes, it'd just be like the first one where it raises up, but you can't, you know, make it out. But to have that type of energy that could come up and just permanently stay there.
Right.
Yes.
So the scientist, it was either Jumper or Jackson, said that he knew how that first Italian photographer felt in 1890 when he took a picture of the shroud and found that in the negative it showed such detail. Or that the negative of the shroud was a positive, as if you're looking at a person, and then the scientists could say how much abuse the body had gone through. I mean, it's just very, very accurate document.
Yes, no, I love the shroud. It's just there's so many endless possibilities with it. You know, to sit there and bring forth to all of us. Can you imagine, even like you were talking about a negative and a positive, to actually be able to have that to imprint on a picture? Would you then get a positive of exactly every little fine line in his face and everything else? Right.
It was a different way for them to view it, because the scientists cannot figure out how they have done it. You know, so people who are debunkers, they say either it's this incredible creation of human hands, and if it is, they can't figure out how the human hands could do it, or it's authentic. But then even then, you're called upon to figure out still how is it done. So it's something that stretches you, kind of like your cards. The precipitated art cards.
It's so interesting because it does have to do with energy, and it's also we talked once before about ectoplasm. And we all have ectoplasm, and that ectoplasm is your energy source. And to sit there, now does that mean as the body sits there and leaves, what a wonderful impression from spirit being put on that and actually go through that material.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
To sit there and raise up and go through that. So that is a form of precipitation. Is it a precipitation like with the cards? Yes and no. It's not, because you're you know, you're not adding the color and it's not flat. These are flat. To me, they raise up in 3D. And
to you they do, because you have that perception.
And that's what's cool, that if I just to touch that material would be just even be around it, to hear the story that it would tell me, you know, of everything would just be awesome. But to sit there and have that precipitation of your energy, you know, just to go up and through it, it's not man-made.
Right. Now, I remember when you were talking to Alan on his show, you were emphasizing, you probably said it on mine, but I really got it when Alan was holding them. You said these cards are created from the energy of the person to whom the card is ultimately to go to.
Yes, it's my, like on my card, it's my energy,
it's your energy
that's being created. So here
spirit world or the other dimensions are working with the energy that you have from this dimension, so that it's actually part of you. Your card is part of you.
It's part of me. So just imagine the energy of Jesus that he had at that time, because he was such an ascended level at that time. You are raised above everything, and to have that energy go through on a material like that, oh, that's that is awesome.
I think because we have to cut this show short, what I'm going to do is roll in with Miceal Ledwith. He was on What the Bleep Do We Know?
Yes.
And he said that Jesus came here to help us overcome our greatest fear, which is the fear of death.
Yes.
So that when we look at the shroud, even today, we have this document.
Yes.
Things happen that are regarded as extraordinary or miraculous. They are not in fact miraculous. They're simply reality. But we've confined ourselves in the basement of reality instead of going into the upper floors of the dwelling at the same time. And when we go to the upper floors of the dwelling, reality responds to the mind and responds to our intent in ways that are unusual. And because they're unusual, they're labeled miracles. All the great people of history that we look up to, that are saints or that are wonder workers or so forth, knew that their consciousness had got above the material realm, and they knew how healing was done, not in the physical body, but in the energies of bodies above it that control the physical. So if you want to institute a healing in the physical body, it has to first be done in the energy body above that sustains the physical. In other words, there are really no miracles. Miracles are done by people who are in touch with the true nature of reality. And a person who takes back their own responsibility for their life and who tries to follow out the example that was taught by Jesus and many great other religious teachers begin to understand that. And then they are on their path back to the source for which is the reason we came here.
Yeah, exactly. On our way back to the source, which is the reason we came here, to have the experience of these lower levels of creation, lower in terms of an experience in materiality. We get a little caught up, and we have these endless repetitions. I think science calls neuronet addictions,
Yes.
that we're not unfolding the full potential of our brain. Some individuals have come along who have been in touch with, you say, true reality, and the expressions of that are the miracles, the healing, and so on. You know, the skill, though, is involved in not worshiping those miracles or those people, but in sort of buckling down to realize we have created our reality.
Mm-hmm.
Every drama that we have, we can't blame anyone except our own self.
Mm-hmm.
And now do we want a different experience?
Yes.
I mean, how do you think it's necessary to have these masters like Jesus Christ coming in? You know, he came to show us. Did he show us?
He did show us, and it's very necessary that we have these masters like Jesus Christ come. But the problem is, what does the person who follows Jesus make of what Jesus did? They tend to put him on a pedestal. Instead of becoming an ideal for us to imitate, he becomes an idol to worship. So therefore, the reason why Jesus came is frustrated at its very core, because he came to lead us and to show us what we could become. So if I'm going back, experiencing the 7 levels of creation, I will find that as a matter of natural happening, that things that are miraculous start to occur around me. That's normal. It's inevitable. It's rare. And unfortunately, it's made even more rare by the fact that when people do accomplish these things, they're also put on pedestals. And they're also worshipped. And people never get the message, you know, that these miracles and these phenomena are not important.
So if you want to look as a scientist, you'd have one brain that's firing at fuller capacity, and the other brain that's watching it can actually give up and not fire at better capacity,
Yes,
but start...
That's one of the great diseases of the mind, that anything that is, you know, powerful and unusual like that, we tend to isolate it in someone else that we worship.
But I know that you believe, nevertheless, that religion has within its, you know, you say, why reinvent the wheel? Let's take the sacrament of the wine and communion. How could that sacrament remind an individual who is willing to take responsibility, who's willing to stop blaming, and wants to change, and wants to live the message, and wants eternal life? How could a moment in their day with this sacrament help
Well, all the sacraments tell us about what life could be like if it were lived properly. They're the peak points. In modern psychology, the 7 sacraments are grouped around the 7 great passages of life: birth, death, marriage, etc. In the Eucharist, we go in and see how life should be lived, because we are all part of the one body. We are all children of God.
So the one body, Jesus says...
And that is symbolized in the bread and wine for us. And when we eat the bread and drink the wine, we are taking in the divine life, or elevating the divine life that's already there in us to a higher plane. But for most people, of course, the required preparation of the mind and the silence and the going within that's necessary for this to happen never takes place. They run in, they run up and get communion as if they were taking a tranquilizer or a vitamin pill. And that's it. So the whole of this wonderfully powerful system of religion which we have has all been trivialized and brought down to the lowest plane. And if a lot of people find it does nothing for them, I'm afraid I have to agree that they're right. It doesn't do anything for them, but the fault is not in the system, it's in the way the system has been trivialized.
Again, the symbolism of the wine and Jesus' blood. Jesus didn't die because we were sinners, did he?
He died to confront death and to show that it could be overcome by the power of the mind.
And so what is the symbol of him sharing his blood through the wine to you?
That everything that he did, he died to confront death and to show that it could be overcome by the power of the mind.
And so what is the symbol of him sharing his blood through the wine?
His very words are quoted in the Gospel of St. John. He said when we were praying, first of all, to believe that what we pray for has already been accomplished, and it will be so. We never think of that when we're advising people to pray. We're always asking God or Christ or someone else or a saint to grant me something which I do not have. That's the exact opposite of what Jesus said.
He said you have it.
It's already there.
It's already there.
Or it can't come to you, because what you're manifesting is the lack of it if you pray for it. If you're keeping in your mind it's already mine, then it will come. He also said in the same gospel that if you do what I'm saying, you will do all the wonders that I did and many more. But where do we hear that, or where do we see it? Nobody's doing it. But we should be doing it. And the fact that we're not doing it is a red warning sign that the message has been perverted.
But in the ancient schools of wisdom, they are doing it, aren't they? There are indications.
In the ancient schools of wisdom, yes, it was always done, because the ancient schools of wisdom, I'm not very fond of the word ancient, because it sounds like it's something, in the New Age or something in the distance, and it's not here anymore. The ancient schools of wisdom were the schools that were in touch with the nature of reality. They knew where we had come from, what we were like in our nature here, and what we needed to do to return and elevate ourselves. And they taught that. It was eminent common sense and facts. And I don't like throwing a big cloak of mystery and obscurity and all that guruism that goes with it, because that again leads people to say, this is not for me, it's for those special people. And thereby they throw away their birthright. So the ancient schools of wisdom were schools of wisdom because they had true knowledge. So in the religions, when these were incorporated, gradually the wisdom became diminished and diluted, and the goals and the means of achieving the goals became altered and toned down time after time after time, so that the original purpose and the methods of attaining that destiny were lost sight of, and all we had were the formalizations of that, which followed.
To me, we're just about out of time, but one last question is, what would a person who is turned on by these ideas do?
Well, they should examine why their own religion isn't answering those needs and isn't teaching those ways of evolving. And perhaps they should go, I'm not saying to the local pastor or priest or whatever, because the likelihood is that they, in all sincerity, don't have those answers either. But the answers are there. And there are places in the world where those answers are prominent and defined. They're rare. Maybe there's only really one doing it at the present time, but the answers can be found there. And
so in closing, we can say it's an esoteric principle to ask and you shall receive.
Ask and you shall receive, and the ancient wisdom, which is a contemporary wisdom as well and always will be yours.
Wonderful. To recap with Father Miceal Ledwith, who's a Catholic priest, about some of his thoughts on his interview time with Swami Kaleshwar, who is a young Hindu accomplished master. What was your experience like?
Well, I had heard nothing about him until about a week or so before his arrival here, when you gave me the book and the video of what he had done, but I certainly was extremely impressed with what I read there and what I saw.
He overcome, and for love.
For love, right.
Yes, because he loved every single thing. Once again, like I said
That's
before.
That's why he did the healings on the lepers.
We don't love ourselves enough, but he was showing loving yourself enough sits there and just elevates you with that ascension.
Right.
So, yes. And yeah, it's a marvelous story. He was an ordinary man, just like we are, on a spiritual journey.
Right.
But the level that he came in on, and the level that he sat there and walked this world with, and then ascended, it's just magnificent. Every one of us. He was here to show us that every one of us can do the same.
No, that and if the cards are part of us, are created with our energy. Imagine when we gaze on the shroud in a way. It was his energy, but it's also when we're looking at it, we're participating. So we're elevated to this extraordinary possibility.
It's that Christ consciousness.
Right.
That energy there together, that shroud. Yes, it's
well,
it is great. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for introducing this week of the Shroud of Turin, and I want to get you and JJ Hurtak together, and I want to invite all my viewers and farther down the rabbit hole to stay tuned to future shows. Also be aware of things we'll be having on the website and conferences, very serious conferences with gifted people like Adele and with scientists, and let's see if we can step into new realities.
Yes.
Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Okay.
Aspect and ignore the others.
You mean take the divine aspect and say he never had to grapple with what we human
take the
beings
divine,
do?
Take the human, take the revolutionary Jesus, take the gentle Jesus, meek and mild, take the Jesus that called Herod a fox and that the Pharisees were a brood of vipers, the worst insult you could ever level at a Jew of that time. There are many aspects to Jesus, and we tend to mold Jesus to our own personality. And you find that at a certain stage in your life, perhaps that your God has become an enlarged version of yourself.
And you're not changing, you're changing your God.
You're changing your God, you're not changing yourself at all. And unfortunately, that's one of the things that religion is not addressing.
So in other words, an ancient school of wisdom, by saying that we are gods within who have descended through 7 levels of creation, gives the knowledge that if we're willing to change, we can have the life that we want.
Yes.
But if we don't want to change, we can keep complaining or keep holding on or making even greater these religions.
Or keep putting all our trust in some great figure who will act as our savior.
Which you say is destined to failure.
It's destined to ensure that we never evolve.
That's a very strong statement, especially for a Catholic priest to be making, that religion is destined to ensure that people do not evolve.
Well, it's not destined to do it, but the way religions are being expressed today does do that. It need not be that way. And my great hope would be that the religions would see more clearly what they're here for and make the shift that's necessary. Now, it will be an enormous shift.
An esoteric principle to ask and you shall receive.
Ask and you shall receive, and the ancient wisdom, which is a contemporary wisdom as well and always will be yours.
Wonderful.